Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Atlantic Council. I'm Landon Darrence. I'm the Senior Director of the Global Energy Center here at the Atlantic Council and Morningstar Chair for Global Energy Security. Excited to be with you today for the launch of our Global Energy Agenda. It's the 2025 Global Energy Agenda. It's the third in my lineage, but the fifth overall. It is our tool for giving guidance and creating discussion around the year ahead. And I will tell you, it's been a journey since we launched it originally 5 years ago. In my time, my first global energy agenda was defined by war and conflict as Russia invaded Ukraine, by some excitement and enthusiasm in the global community a year prior in the context of coming off of COP28 and a lot of dialogue and a sense of achievement by many around the global climate community. And now I think one defined by incredible political transformation, and that's certainly the case of this year's Global Energy Agenda. And I'm not just talking about the United States. You know, as the G7 comes together, for example, this year, it will have up to 5 new leaders around the table of the free world, and you know, very few here since Donald Trump was last in office. In fact, I think Manuel Macron will be the only one at the table with Donald Trump from 2019 when they last met. So just a moment of incredible transformation, and we're excited to have this discussion here today. You know, there's 2 features and facets of the Global Energy Agenda. It is broken down into a series of essays from an incredible array of global leaders and a survey component. But I want to take a moment and really highlight some of the leaders that we've had contribute to this year's Global Energy Agenda. We have the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley, the well-renowned Dan Yergin, the Chief Executive of Singapore's Energy Market Authority, Rick Muncrief, the CEO of Devon Energy, Dane Jorgensen, the EU Commissioner for Energy and Housing, who is putting out his first essay since taking his role as commissioner. And one of my fellow panelists today, Andres Roberto Smithmans, who is the Executive Secretary of ALADE. We're very excited to have you with us because this is an esteemed crop of very diverse perspectives. And I think you're going to see that in the conversation we have in the panel today. But complementing that diverse group of perspectives from our esteemed essayists, this year's Global Energy Agenda featured something really remarkable. We had over 1,000 respondents from over 100 countries. And I can tell you that's a 4X from where we started. And it's a real big testament to new partnerships with ALADE, with IEEJ out of Japan and others in Africa, Southeast Asia, and elsewhere. But it provides a diversity of thoughts and perspectives that we just hadn't had before. And you see the diversity of perspectives in the age demographics, gender demographics, the world in which people are coming from, whether it's academia, finance, oil and gas, renewables, nuclear. There's the fidelity of the data in this survey is really remarkable and a testament to just what the Global Energy Agenda has become. So, you know, I talked about the fact that we have a tremendous moment of transformation, and the world is going through a lot of different facets of geopolitics in the Middle East. Russia, Ukraine is now over 1,000 days. But it's not just about geopolitics. We also have a moment where we have new facets on the global stage. Artificial intelligence, thinking about how that fits into the global dialogue, and certainly the culminary point of how we thought about the Global Energy Agenda this year. But of course, we're here in Washington, D.C., and we're excited to bring those perspectives to bear too. And so to provide a little clarity on the U.S. vision for global energy policy and the energy landscape in the year ahead, I'm particularly excited now to be able to turn the floor to the Honorable Steve Winberg, who's the Acting Undersecretary for Infrastructure in the U.S. Department of Energy. And Steve, it's great to have you back in the city and really excited to hear your thoughts.
Well, thank you, Landon, and good afternoon on this rather cold Washington, D.C. day. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. and to join you in the launch of the Global Energy Agenda. And I want to start off by thanking the Atlantic Council for facilitating this upcoming panel discussion. We were in the green room and I got to meet all the panelists, but in the interest of complete and full transparency and disclosure, I know two of the panelists. One of them, of course, is Landon. We worked in Egypt together. And then the other one is Chris, and Chris preceded me as the Assistant Secretary for Fossil Energy. So I, in effect, followed in his footsteps. So it's good to see both of you here today. Today, though, I want to focus on the Trump administration's energy agenda. And I hope maybe my remarks might provide some insight and maybe even contribute to your discussions today. But President Trump's energy agenda is pretty straightforward. Number one, boost domestic energy production to reduce energy costs for Americans, ensure our domestic energy security, and grow our economy and jobs. Second is to strengthen our national security interest. And three is to expand global energy markets for American energy resources that we believe will help our friends and partners around the world to meet their energy goals. These goals, though, require developing and using all of our vast energy resources: renewables, nuclear, oil, gas, coal, geothermal. All of it needs to be there. And then developing the technologies and the infrastructure to maximize the benefit of those resources. So the Department of Energy is at the vanguard of this effort. And to achieve the President's goals, Secretary Wright has hit the ground running, and he has laid out a sweeping agenda focused on achieving innovation and technology, breakthroughs that we need, and then building out our critical energy infrastructure. So I want to highlight some of the initial actions that will guide the department as we get underway with this historic transformation. First and foremost, our focus will be on what Secretary Wright calls advancing energy addition, not subtraction. As I mentioned, we want to develop and use all of our energy resources. And this is a striking difference between President Trump's energy agenda and the previous administration. We are focused on expanding nuclear energy and getting our natural resources out of the ground, not keeping it there. Because at the end of the day, modern life and our economic and national security require more energy, not less. We're seeing that here in the United States, and we're seeing it globally. So the department's goals going forward will be to unleash the great abundance of American energy. And I want to note here today that this means that we will also return to regular order for LNG exports. Again, our energy abundance is an asset, not a liability, and an asset not just here at home, but around the world. And I think you have to look no further than Europe to see how the LNG asset has positively impacted Europe in this time of crisis they're in with the Ukraine war. So the first Trump administration saw a massive and historic expansion of American LNG in the global market. Several of the LNG export authorizations done under Trump 45 now have become exports and serving the global market. Thanks to actions just a few years ago, the U.S. is now not only the world's largest top oil and gas producer, we're also the largest global exporter of hydrocarbons. And just last week, the Secretary and the President announced a new export authorization for the Commonwealth LNG project proposed for Cameron Parish, Louisiana. Once constructed, this project will be delivering over 1.2 billion cubic feet per day of natural gas as LNG. So we want to pick up where the first Trump administration left off. On January 20th, the department resumed consideration of pending applications to export American LNG to countries that do not have a free trade agreement with the U.S. And that's going to continue, and you're going to hear about that. So the bottom line is that we're getting American LNG potential back to work, back on track. And we want our global partners to know that we support global energy security energy affordability, and energy access. The DOE is also focused on unleashing commercial nuclear power in the United States. As Secretary Wright has noted, 25 years ago, nuclear energy was 6% of global energy. Today, it's 4%. Think about that. 6% globally 25 years ago, and now we're at 4%. That cannot continue given the massive amount of energy that's needed globally. So the growing global energy demand, including the use of energy for manufacturing, will require the commercialization of affordable, abundant nuclear energy. And for any of you that have followed Secretary Wright's career, he has quite a bit of expertise in this area, as well as oil and gas production. So our goal for the United States is to lead the effort on nuclear energy and enable the rapid deployment and export of next-generation nuclear technologies. Clearly, innovation is the key to achieving energy abundance, and the Trump administration is leaning heavily into unleashing American energy innovation. At the Department of Energy, we will focus our resources on developing technologies that will not only advance basic science and expand America's technological leadership, but also reduce cost, strengthen the reliability of our grid, and bolster America's manufacturing competitiveness and supply chain security. So our R&D portfolio will prioritize, again, affordable, reliable, and secure energy technologies, including fossil fuel, advanced nuclear, geothermal, and hydropower. Just as an example, the United States is focused once again on increasing natural gas production. The Department of Energy will invest in R&D in areas like smart pipelines, methane mitigation, unconventional field site tests, and produced water, which will continue to be important as we work to ramp up production of natural gas here in the United States. There will also be a focus on converting natural gas to products, fertilizers, plastics, and hydrogen, and we will continue to explore the potential of hydrates. Now let me move to carbon capture. The U.S. has been a leader in the development of carbon capture and sequestration, and we will continue that leadership. The Department of Energy's work will have important impacts beyond our borders by improving energy security for millions, and in many cases, expanding energy access to those that live without reliable electricity. And it will enable them to use their homegrown fuels, including coal. I also want to touch on another area that is vital to our economic and national security. That's critical minerals and America's dependence on other countries, most worrisome China, for these minerals. You may recall that during President Trump's first term, the administration took the unprecedented step of developing a government-wide strategy to build a domestic supply chain for critical minerals and reduce America's dependence on China for these minerals. The Department of Energy was central to that strategy, and one of our focuses was R&D efforts to identify and extract critical minerals and rare earth elements from previously untapped sources, especially our vast coal reserves. We also established the Division of Mineral Sustainability in the Office of Fossil Energy to focus research on producing a domestic supply of critical minerals from those coal resources and the associated byproducts from the mining operations. And we launched the Carbon Ore Rare Earth Critical Minerals Initiative, also known as CORE-CM, which I might add is still underway and will continue to be. So it's important that we expand our work at the department on being able to develop rare earth elements and critical minerals from these resources and really ramp up the effort to get a secure, reliable domestic critical minerals supply chain in place. It's so important for everything that we do in energy and everything that we do in defense and everything that we do as consumers as well. So the department must also prioritize real, measurable technological breakthroughs in areas like nuclear fusion, high-performance computing, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. Certainly, by any measure, that's a full scope of work that's ahead of us. But let me also mention this. Both President Trump and Secretary Wright have made it clear that the days of wasteful spending are over. This is why the projects and money that have been put forward in the Infrastructure Investments and Job Act and the Inflation Reduction Act are going to be looked at very closely to see that there is sufficient benefit to taxpayers to justify their projected cost. Our focus remains on transformational innovation that actually ensures energy abundance and security, as well as economic growth and our national security. What this means is that we will rigorously enforce project milestones to ensure that taxpayer resources are allocated appropriately and cost-effectively and consistent with the law. So let me move on now to the grid. We all know the weaknesses of the grid, and they're growing. And so we need to consider this in the context of the current electricity growth that we're experiencing and the potential demand that things like AI will place on our grid. So we have to finally strengthen our grid reliability and security. We also need to streamline permitting and identify undue burdens on American energy, and that, of course, includes grid build-out. We made some progress on the permitting front during the President's first administration, and we want to double down on those efforts in the second administration. So the department will prioritize more efficient permitting to enable private sector investments and build the energy infrastructure needed to make energy more affordable, reliable, and secure. And we will identify and exercise our legal authorities to expedite the approval and construction of reliable energy infrastructure. So that's the overview of President Trump's and Secretary Wright's energy agenda and the pathways that the Department of Energy will pursue to achieve the President's goal. President Trump's executive order declaring a national energy emergency and the recently established National Energy Dominance Council provide us the tools and the coordination that we need to ensure that we can achieve these goals and provide the affordable energy that we need here as Americans and that our friends and allies have come to depend around the world. So in closing, we hit the ground running on January 20th. We're hard at work on all of this, and we look forward to working with all of you. So thank you very much.
Sorry. Well, first of all, let me thank the Acting Undersecretary for Infrastructure at the U.S. Department of Energy for his remarks and for sharing the administration's priorities for the United States energy agenda going forward. Good afternoon to you. Welcome to the launch of the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center's 2025 Global Energy Agenda. My name is Liliana Diaz, and it's a privilege and honor for me to be here. I am a senior non-resident fellow with the Global Energy Center and also a lecturer on energy and climate policy at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies, SAIS. The energy landscape we see in 2025 is marked by profound transformation. From the sweeping political changes that reshaped governments worldwide in 2024, to the surge of energy demand driven by artificial intelligence, to ongoing conflicts that continue to impact global energy security, today we face a complex set of challenges and opportunities. Each year, our Global Energy Agenda survey takes the pulse of the energy community, gathering insights from over 1,000 experts across more than 100 countries. This year's results paint a picture of a sector at a critical inflection point. Nearly 3/5 of respondents identified policy and geopolitical factors as the primary drivers of market volatility. Meanwhile, an intriguing paradox has emerged. While a majority believe achieving net zero emissions would boost economic growth, only a quarter think that we'll reach that goal by 2050. To help us understand these dynamics and their implications, we're fortunate to have with us 4 leaders who bring unique perspectives to these challenges. Let me introduce them, and please join me in welcoming to the stage Mr. Landon Derrence, Senior Director and Morningstar Chair for Global Energy Security at the Atlantic Council, Mrs. Lindsay Merrill, Managing Director of Global Business Development at Engine Number 1, Mr. Christopher Smith, Chief Government Affairs Officer at Ford, and Mr. Andres Rebolledo, Executive Secretary of OLARE. Together, they represent perspectives from policy, finance, industry, and regional integration, all crucial elements as we navigate this pivotal moment in the global energy transition. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. A reminder that this event is live and on record. And a bit about questions. Whether you're joining us here or in person or online, we welcome your participation. You can submit questions through the event via askac.com. In the final segment of our discussion, we'll also take questions from our in-person audience, so please simply raise your hand and a member of our team will bring you a microphone. We'll do our best to address as many of your questions as possible. And without further ado, let's begin our conversation. Let me begin the conversation with a lightning round to set the stage. And to do that, I want to go back to our survey. Our survey highlights a complex intersection of challenges. Nearly 3/5 of respondents cite policy-related factors as primary drivers of market volatility, while unprecedented energy demand from AI and data centers is creating pressures on the energy system. Adding to this complexity, in just its first month, the new Trump administration has announced sweeping tariffs, emphasize energy dominance, and signal major shifts in trade policy, changes that, given America's role in global energy markets, have far-reaching implications. So I'd like to hear from each of you. How is your sector responding to these converging pressures of political transformation and technological disruption? And what do you see as the greatest risks and opportunities in this environment? And to do it a little more specific, I'd like to start with Landon to see how these shifts are affecting global energy security and policy frameworks.
Well, thanks so much, Lily. Thanks for everybody being here. And thank you for being a great moderator. I know I didn't ask everybody to use Ask AC to get questions in the front, so I'm glad you covered the bases. Look, I'm going to go from my quote sector being here at the Atlantic Council and think about this from the lens of what the data said and what the survey results commented on. And you teed up one specific element, which was energy market volatility is a question we ask on an annual basis. What is the biggest cause of energy market volatility over the next decade? And rightfully, policy-related factors really are a lever here. So whether that's use of energy for geopolitical influence or ESG policy, they tend to go to the top. And those were our top 2 answers, covering 55% alone, 25% or 45% alone, 25% on geopolitical use of energy. And another 20%, which is the first time that this has risen to the scale it has of looking through what ESG policy means for market volatility. And so when you look at risks, I have to be able to point to those 2, that policymakers have tremendous influence over this, the direction of uncertainty, frankly. and how much stability we can build into the market for industry to be able to be dominant in its own sector, to bring economic opportunity, to bolster national security. So those are, to me, the biggest risks. I think in the opportunity space, if I took the full arc of this year's global energy agenda, Josh Parker writes a really interesting piece for NVIDIA and brings in a conversation around AI and artificial intelligence, and Acting Under Secretary Wimberg just referenced supercompute and quantum and all these other aspects that people don't always know about the Department of Energy. The reality is there's a lot of opportunity in this space too. And so while we have near-term constraints, whether that's the conflict in Ukraine, unrest in the Middle East in the last year and a half, 2 years, I think that there are some technological components that are really quite sweeping in the inclusivity of how they can influence every facet of our life. It's not just the energy sector, it is health, it is finance. And so to me, looking for the opportunities within this space, that's a real trigger. And you need an olive branch of an area where people can kind of culminate around and find a solidarity. I think that the technology space is really providing that opportunity.
Excellent. Lindsay, I am interested. I mean, Landon just gave us a very, very comprehensive view of risks and opportunities. How is the market pricing these new realities?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's an exciting time to be in Washington, and I think it's an excellent opportunity the Trump administration has to figure out how we can unlock a lot of this opportunity. I think that we are at a really interesting intersection of the digital revolution and the energy transition. I think this report outlines a lot of what we need to focus on in 2025, and it's a great time to start the beginning of this year with this conversation on how we can come together, and once the policy is set, we can all move forward with a strong foundation to find these solutions. I think AI, as we've also touched on, is going to be a key driver for some of the tech advances, and we are going to be needing to focus on the power to provide for some of those changes. So we can come together with some of our partners who are also key energy producers and find solutions, and the private sector can play a role as an integrator and facilitator of those conversations. I think in the last several years, there's been a lot of capital to deploy and not too many commercial viable projects. So if we can identify those and bring everyone together, I think that would be an excellent approach.
Thank you, Lindsay. Christopher, what those new realities and the new opportunities that Lindsay spoke about mean for industrial strategy and manufacturing, in particular to the automaking industry that you're part of?
Yeah, thanks. Well, big question. But first of all, I want to thank you and the Atlantic Council for convening this panel. The Atlantic Council always does a great job of convening. Also, it was a pleasure to hear comments from my friend Steve Wimberg. I spent some time at the Department of Energy. I love the department, the researchers who do really, really important work for the nation. So it's comforting and it's encouraging to see that we've got an experienced leader kind of in the helm there, doing really, really important work. This is going to be a busy time in terms of policies and lots happening, and we'll get into some of these things as we get into the questions. But one thing I guess I emphasize as the Ford Motor Company, like we're a 120-year-old company, we've been through many cycles, and all of our business cycles are going to be longer than any particular political cycle. We're always trying to understand the needs of the customer, how technology and new innovations are going to better allow us to surprise and delight the customers who at the end are driving all of our business models. So as we think about some of these new challenges around energy and energy abundance, access to critical minerals, not only extraction but refining of the minerals are going to make the vehicles of the future move. As we think about the important propulsion systems from internal combustion engine vehicles through hybrids to the advent of electric vehicles, we've got lots of kind of new things to think about. So as I came from the world of energy, now I'm working for an auto company. Interestingly, many of the things that I spend all day working on are very similar to my previous life, kind of focusing on energy because energy is such an important part of the manufacturing landscape of the future.
Mm-hmm. And Andres, let me close with you this question and go beyond the borders of the United States to talk about what these challenges and these opportunities mean for Latin America and its energy markets.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to have this opportunity here to share with you what is the energy panorama in Latin America and try to make an effort in a couple of minutes to share. First, I would like also to thank the possibility to collaborate in this very important report. Latin American and Caribbean region is a rich country, rich region in terms of energy resources. We have everything in that region. And also we are using a very small part of our potentiality. We are the greenest region in the world in terms of the primary matrix, but also the electricity generation matrix. Actually, the last year, 2024, we reached 70% of our energy electricity generation capacity in clean energy technology. Especially the last year, the most active, dynamic technology was wind and solar. Solar growth the last year, 40% in one single year. So that means that we are in a very good path in order to step forward and move to the second stage of the transformation and energy transition, which is not only decarbonize the electricity market, not only the offer, but also the demand. And there is the most challenge because you have to tackle with the decarbonization transport and industrial and also residential. So I think that is, and that panorama is, you can see we have plenty of opportunity to continue expanding this sector, and also not only generation in the case of electricity market, but also the transmission and distribution grid are very important and incorporate and need an important amount of financial resource. And I think that is the challenge, talking about the finance. In OLADE, our organization, Latin American Energy Organization, we made every year a study, prospective study, in order to see how it's going to look the region in a optimistic scenario net zero, and by 2050. And in terms of finance, only by 2030 we need $400 billion in investment in renewable energy if we want to reach that condition in 2050. So I think that there is, in this point, one of the most challenge, because you need to incorporate all the actors in the finance, this sector in Latin America, in energy.
Thank you very much, Andres. Landon, I want to go back to the issue of security and policy shifts with you. Our survey shows that the Middle East tensions now rank Ukraine as the top energy security concern. So how should we understand these evolving security challenges in the context of a new administration that has a preference for an energy dominance agenda?
Well, let's acknowledge the transformational element of the fact that the Middle East is the driving geopolitical element in the eyes of our survey respondents, which is a really unique moment of change vice the prior four agendas. You know, it's in our name, the Atlantic Council. I think that there's an imperative that, you know, Russia, Ukraine, the conversations there are going to be evident. But the fact is, a lot of people don't know the Middle East program here is also one of our largest. We do a lot of engagement with the region, and to watch that elevate to the top is quite a moment here. And I think just to reflect on why for a second, you know, the conflict in Israel and Gaza is 1,000 miles away from the biggest oil field in the world, Ghawar in Saudi Arabia. It's 1,000 miles away. And I think it's a testament to the fact that you don't need direct kinetic consequence to the oil sector in the region to give a perception of geopolitical risk and volatility. And if you look at the Arab Spring from start to finish over a decade ago, energy prices raised 40% in that moment. But what's also remarkable in that same time frame now, as we look at where energy prices are today, is how placid they are in light of the scale of conflict globally. And so, you know, to answer your question, in a moment where we have incredible anxiety and angst within the survey respondents about the possibility of conflict, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in Russia, Ukraine, somewhere else in the world. We also have very stable energy markets. And I think that this speaks to a transformation that's been happening and coinciding with all of this chaos. And that is, America is a major energy exporter. And so when you ask me about the Trump administration and the policies coming in and how that's going to influence it, and you hear from the acting undersecretary just before this, what you know is there's an intent to bring that abundance to bear at a scale that we still haven't even seen yet. So to me, I think what we're projecting is an opportunity for greater stability. And there's a clear demarcation about where we are today with a strong American energy sector and where we were 2 decades ago when the United States was importing 12 million barrels a day. And so that would be my answer. There is a clear sense of concern. There's a clear sense of concern about where the world's heading, the geopolitical levers that can bring instability, but we have a very tangible sense of the stability that we're realizing from a U.S. energy sector.
It's a very positive outlook, I must
I'm
say.
always positive. I'm a Californian.
Lindsay, having served at Treasury and now at Engine One, you understand both policy and market perspectives. Our survey shows that rising energy demand in emerging markets is a key source of volatility. Yet these regions urgently need capital for both energy and transition investments. To you, how are today's geopolitical dynamics shaping investment strategies in the energy sector, particularly in emerging markets where the policy framework may require evolving to de-risk those investments?
Sure, thank you. I think I'll break this up into 2 parts. But I think the geopolitical landscape, the report mainly focuses and highlights on the prominence of the Middle East and the role our partners are looking to play there. Not only as a driver for artificial intelligence. A little bit about my background. I just finished nearly 15 years in the US government, most recently at the White House as the Senior Director for Energy and Investment, where we've looked at a lot at this nexus. And I think that our Middle Eastern partners are looking to invest in their own disruption. While we look through the energy transition, we need to transition away from oil and gas, but that does not mean we are not using oil and gas. So this is why the financial sector and the strategic investments need to be focusing on ways that we can use the resources we have today and enable to unlock renewable options down the line. So Engine Number One just announced our project with Chevron and GE Vernova a couple weeks ago, where we're going to have co-located power plants with data centers. And this is something that I think that a strategic role that the financial and investment sector can play of what are the bottlenecks that we see both in power and in tech, and how can we unlock those solutions? So our founder, Chris James, identified the bottleneck to be power and equipment. So he brought together Chevron and GE Vernova, and we've secured the equipment and we've convened, and we're looking for ways to bring some of the investment to the United States to secure for our domestic tech. I think that this administration has some challenges that they might want to face, and the Undersecretary talked about them a little bit, but I see, we need to work out a threshold for CFIUS to make sure that we can draw investment into the United States in a way that's meaningful for our industry and our manufacturers and for our energy sector. We need to figure out how we're going to work on our CHIPS thresholds, which is not energy, but energy does play a role in that decision. We need to figure out power and how we're going to make sure that it's not only oil and gas, but similar to our project, that it will enable for CCS down the line once we secure customers and can have that collaboration together. And all of this will require efficient permitting, both at the federal and state level. So we're looking forward to playing that role and making sure that we can be an example for investments in emerging markets to make sure that they can secure the same kind of investment. And these dialogues that happen between the private sector and the public sector are going to be critical for US government to be able to de-risk projects and unlock investment in emerging markets.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Let me now transition to a different topic, technology and the market response, but let us keep the focus on financing and the market signals. So going back to our survey, related underinvestment has emerged as a top concern for market volatility. even among renewable energy producers. Yet most respondents see economic growth potential in the transition. How are you navigating these seemingly contradictory signals? And what does this tell us about the sectors and technologies where financing needs to flow? That's for you, Lindsay.
Where it needs to go. Like in terms of the technology specifically?
Yes. I mean, where do you see the most opportunity for financing flows to drive change and bring economic growth?
I think in order for us to be successful here at home, we need to ensure we have secure and resilient supply chains for a lot of the pieces required for successful technologies, whether that be supporting infrastructure or the turbines themselves, or maybe it's semiconductors. I think that if we can all work together with our partners to invest in whether it's mineral-rich countries or their infrastructures to ensure that we're securing our supply chains back home, I think that would be a great way to secure the technologies.
Perfect, thank you. Christopher, I'm quite interested in your perspectives on technology and the market response. As you think about Ford's strategic long-term planning and how these tensions between the market signals and the climate goals influence your approach to manufacturing and the type of investments in technology that you select?
Yeah, so that's a very big question. So I'll talk about a couple things first, kind of our overall kind of investment strategy, and a little bit about how we see technology and the development of markets for cars, for automobiles. So, over the last several years, we've made a historic, Ford Motor Company's made a historic investment in the United States. We're building 2 NCM nickel, cobalt, manganese battery plants in Kentucky, joint ventures. We have a joint venture building another NCM battery plant in Tennessee. We're building a new assembly plant, greenfield plant in West Tennessee as well, so $5.6 billion we're spending in Tennessee alone. In a part of Tennessee, in a part of the state that has never seen this scale of investment. So really, really impactful, not only for the Ford Motor Company, for economic development in the United States, but also for the people who live and work in this part of Tennessee. So really, really extremely impactful and important for our future. We're also building a lithium iron phosphate battery plant in Marshall, Michigan. So we've got 2 different battery chemistries, 3 plants, a new greenfield assembly plant in Tennessee, all built here in the United States. So all domestic production. We employ more domestic auto workers than any other company, and we think it's really important to do what we can to make sure that we're investing here in the U.S. So really, really critical. When you look at our portfolio, kind of again driven by technological advances, Ford is number 1 internal combustion engine vehicles. We're number 2 in electric, and we're number 3 in hybrids. And so when you look at all of the different options that customers are choosing, and it's our job to try to see where these markets are going, we've, as you think about kind of all the above approach, we're certainly kind of pursuing all of these technologies. Hard to overstate, though, how important it's going to be for us to ensure that we do win in electric. Really, really important part of the market to make sure that we are better than international competitors, particularly Chinese competitors, at building these vehicles that are going to have a couple of dozen moving parts as opposed to a couple of thousand moving parts. And so bringing those costs down, understanding where consumers are going, understanding the supply chains so that we secure those and make them more secure, and working together with partners to build the infrastructure that we need to make sure that we're meeting the convenience of all of our customers. So lots of challenges there. We can't wait to see how everything's going to evolve. Like, we have to make real decisions in the moment. And so last thing I'll kind of mention on this point is that to the degree that policymakers understand the ways that their policies actually impact companies like Ford that are making these big commercial investments, that's really going to be the thing that determines whether or not policies will work, whether or not they got the impact on jobs, on national security that we expect and that we endeavor to achieve, is really that connection between the policy drivers and the ways that companies like Ford and many other companies that are investing in the United States actually react to try to bring those investments here, bring them home.
I want to build on something that you mentioned, building reliable supply chains, and talk about industrial policy. There are issues on trade and industrial policy that are affected by trends that our survey shows. The survey results show that resource nationalism ranks among the top drivers for market volatility, and that we're seeing that an expanded use of tariffs and industrial policy globally. How is Ford and, in general, the automaking industry approaching supply chain resilience in this environment, particularly with regards to critical minerals and electrical vehicle components?
That's a great question. So the auto industry got a really abrupt kind of a crash course in the fragility of supply chains during the pandemic, particularly around semiconductors, which are every year more and more important for the design and the manufacture and implementation of the vehicles that we sell to our consumers. So when you have a narrow surplus of a particular resource, be it semiconductors or anything else, you're looking for efficiency, you're looking for cost, you're looking for security of supply, but you're not, you're focused on other things, right? When that narrow surplus goes to a narrow deficit, the wheels come off. And there was a period in which, but for, a 50-cent semiconductor, we weren't able to make, a $60,000 vehicle. Or you'd manufacture the vehicle, you'd park it somewhere, and then when the part came in, you'd have to bring that vehicle back into the manufacturing facility to retrofit it, put that part back in, which is, for cost and quality, that's not the way that you want to run your business. So incredibly important that we drive more transparency into our supply chain. So not only Ford, but all of the OEMs have been really focused on that. Really focused on policies that help bring more semiconductor manufacturing back to the United States. Incredibly important, not only for automotive manufacturers like Ford, but also for other manufacturers, for the defense industry also, to ensure that we've got a secure supply of semiconductors and that we bring more of those here. And then the importance of critical minerals, not only the extraction, but the upgrading and refining of critical minerals that's going to be necessary both for the motors that propel the vehicles, but also the batteries that store the energy in hybrid vehicles and in electric vehicles. So much more that we can do here in the United States in terms of understanding the resource base, producing and upgrading and refining these minerals here in the United States. This is a program within the Department of Energy that's grown a lot since I was at DOE, because I think there is a greater appreciation for the importance and the impact of critical minerals. Much of this driven by the fact that we see electric vehicles being an important part of the mix in the future. So rules that make it more certain for companies to be able to deploy capital domestically in the extraction, the refining of critical minerals, lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese, graphite. Really, really important, I think, for the future of American manufacturing and the securing of our supply chains.
I want to turn to Andres and go beyond the United States and talk about partnership with Latin America. Critical minerals is a priority of the administration, and Latin America has a lot to offer on that sector. You have served as Chile's Minister of Energy, and now you lead OLARE, which brings together all the energy ministers to discuss policy. So you have a really good grasp of what are national and regional energy dynamics. I wanted to ask that given the rise in industrial policy throughout the globe, and particularly in Latin America, how should policymakers be thinking about balancing domestic manufacturing goals with the need for international cooperation on energy and climate?
Yeah, it's a good question and a big challenge because, first of all, in terms of our, once again, potentiality, that Latin American represent around 25% of all the production of critical mineral, which is a good opportunity, a good base in order to have a value national and regional value chain. But the reality that is in our country, that except 2 or 3 countries, we don't have a good, strong industrial, and especially in the energy sector, but especially also in the renewable, where is the sector who is expanding at much more velocity. And so that is the reason why, as ALADE, we play a role in order to put all the ministers together and to try the way to cooperate in this regard, and to try to find some initiative where all the country can cooperate and to have some collective goal, and in that point to advance in this challenge. Because today we provide mineral critical to the world, and in that regard we play a very important geopolitical speaking, but we need to advance and to incorporate, industrialize this sector in our region.
Thank you. I wanted to comment that this is the first year that our survey takes into account input from Latin America through OLADE. And so it is the first time that we can see perhaps the priorities of Latin America and as a proxy of priorities for the Global South. The survey shows that there are distinct priorities, and there is a tendency for expecting rising energy demand. And my question to you is, how can regional integration in the Americas help balance development needs of the region with energy security while we advance decarbonization goals?
Yeah, the energy integration is a big opportunity to tackle with this challenge. Yeah. First of all, it's important to share what is the current situation in the integration, in the energy integration in our region. Because it has been a long time ambition, political ambition, and we have made advance, but we have different reality. What I mean, we have some good level of integration in Central America, for instance, in the electricity market. There are 6 countries which, trade electricity every day for the last 30 years. But if you go to the South American, you have some bilateral connection, a sub-regional connection, but you don't have a regional approach. This is the first challenge that we are working in order to get a more comprehensive integration. And also to say, not only talking about electricity, but also, which is quite important, energetic in our political economy in the region, I'm talking about the natural gas. Natural gas is part of a very important resource in many countries in Latin America, and in some way is a factor of integration as well, especially what is going on today in Argentina, but not only in Argentina, in some countries in the north of South America. So we have to move forward in this area because there's opportunity, the energy integration in this point. And, but also I have to say the integration is not only infrastructure. It's important also to advance in a harmonization of regulation, which is crucial in order to have a single market and regional market, because you can have a good infrastructure, good investment, but you have to have the rules that allow to make this trade chain in electricity or natural gas. And that is very challenging, politically speaking, because the country have to make accommodation and modification in its internal regulation. So that is has to keep in mind in order to advance in integration. And finally, I think previous to make a decision, you have to imagine what is the best way not to have not only domestic and national planning, but also regional planning, in order to have the idea in each country what are the potential to connect with the rest of the country and neighborhood, and not only think all the planification into an internal market.
Lily, can I jump in really quick?
Sure.
Well, first of all, now you don't need to read Andreas's essay in the piece because you just got the Spark Notes. So it's a really good summary of his contribution here. We've had the opportunity, and I'm sorry, my moderator instincts are popping up. We've had an opportunity on a question that's popped up a couple times on the screen from Henry that's talking about the penetration of China in the market. And I have to tell you, I did a presentation to the G7 this morning, Energy Working Group, and one of the graphs that we showed was China's ownership of the solar supply chain, which just to be clear is like literally just one bar of China. It's like there's no diversity in that anymore. And so having an expert in manufacturing, and in your role, Chris, on Ford, and having an expert from a region that's so central to manufacturing and giving component parts to the United States for our industry overall, I'm curious of your thoughts in general. Is there a different way that we should be looking at this? Certainly we need partnership in the region to bring minerals in, but should we also be doing a top-down national security review? Maybe a smart architecture of saying, where do we actually have national security vulnerabilities, and what component parts in an automobile, in an electric grid, should we be ring fencing with partners and allies to make sure that that's a market for us in the United States? I'm just sorry to throw it out there, but I don't know a better answer to the China question to say that we're certainly looking at partnership on minerals. Are there other lenses in which we should be tackling this?
Yeah, so, big question, right? So, interesting analogy, right, with solar panels and vehicles, right? So you have this enormous overcapacity with solar panels. You're seeing the same with electric vehicles in China right now, all heavily state subsidized by the Chinese Communist Party. Lots and lots of companies making very competent vehicles, by the way, now, like very, very good. All these companies except for BYD are losing money. So they're all losing money. They get propped up by governments, enormous capacity. At some point, all that capacity is going to come into the global market. And so that is a feature, not a bug, of the business model there. So a real challenge. Also, as you mentioned, they dominate, particularly the refining of critical minerals. So you extract critical minerals anywhere in the world, and much of that mass, of that volume, makes its way back to China to be refined and put into batteries and sold back to us. So really significant that I think that Ford is actually making the very first automotive lithium iron phosphate battery plant in the United States. Like, all those batteries get imported, but to build those here in the United States is incredibly critical. We're constantly looking for new sources of critical minerals, and rare earth elements actually aren't rare. They're everywhere, right? A bit of a misnomer, but the refining for them, these are big industrial projects, and you have to figure out how to permit them. You have to figure out how to finance them. And there has been a decision, made by the Chinese government that they're going to concentrate those plants in China. And so, to the extent that policymakers push forward policies that help us to extract, refine critical minerals in the United States, to work with our partners in areas of the world in which we have friends and allies, that we can create more secure supply chains. We think that's incredibly important. Now, how do you ring fence it, in which levels, what lists, how those lists get made up? I used to be the policy guy. I'm not now. I'm just trying to sell cars, right? But I think there's the principle, I think, of looking at those lists that have very, very high levels of concentration in one place, and finding ways that we can diversify that, and more specifically bring more of that to the United States.
Yeah. I just got a question from the audience, and I think this is directed to Lindsay. What role does the finance sector play in encouraging investors to make strategic investments that strengthen energy security while continuing to accelerate the push for a decarbonized future? What sector specifically needs new or continuing investment for maximum impact?
I think what sector specifically needs?
Need new or continued investment for maximum impact.
For maximum impact. I think the financial sector can identify so much of what needs to be invested in. I think that our grid, specifically our antiquated grid, needs to be, rebuilt and built out and expanded. And I think that if we can find ways to move capital for that, I think that would be revolutionary. I think that if we can find ways to make power more accessible for all rate-paying consumers and keep prices where they are and expand together, I think that would be the goal, especially as we're looking for AI to multiply what we're looking for power in the next couple of years.
I believe this question is part of the Q&A and is directed to all panelists. How do you think the Trump administration's policies will affect different regions globally? How will certain countries benefit or be harmed more than others?
You have a thought on the region?
I think that, of course, given that we're talking about the United States, that all the effects are globally. In the case of Latin America, my impression that, especially because the energy sector currently participate many actors globally, many global players in the investment, we have to be pragmatic. And I think in the case of natural gas, in the case of renewable energy, there's a good business case over there. So in that regard, I think that you have to be open with all the investors that want to participate, even that the United States or our own region. And I think that is the best solution for development the energy sector in our region.
I know picking up a conversation on the administration isn't always a favorite one for the field to answer. So I'll pick up a little bit of my thoughts on this too, which is the biggest story in the Trump administration really isn't the energy policy. I think the energy policy is actually pretty well articulated. It's all of the above. It's intentionally there to buttress American industry, American economy, American national security, but also to have the benefit bleed over to the international community. That's a very straightforward policy. I think where the challenge becomes is reflected on this stage, right? We have a very diverse community of energy experts, auto industry, manufacturing, finance, and that's deliberate because energy markets are really heavily interconnected with every facet of the global economy. And when you're dealing with trade and the conversation of tariffs, I mean, this will have implications on how energy flows, how the global economy operates, where we find efficiencies. I'm not going to take a position on the utility or futility of that process, but I know for a fact there's consequence. And I think that there's a very deliberate consequence articulated from the White House to search for some degree of reciprocity in this process. I think if you talk to other capitals and I go to Brussels, they're going to have a very different opinion, of course. But the one certainty we have right now in a world that we don't actually know where this is going to build out is the fact that there's going to be change. And I think the biggest stories are going to come from that trade agenda. That would be my take, which has really interesting implications on other facets of decades, for example, of sanctions policy as we move away from an abundance of sanctions in favor of maybe more tailored and bilateral tariffs. I think we're going to see a really different world evolve here. And so the one certainty we do have is changes on the horizon. I think it's too early to fully judge the outcomes of that because we haven't seen that fully baked yet. We're just 1 month into the Trump administration.
We have about a minute, and if there are anybody with a question, can we have?
Given the amount of demand for data center and data storage capacity, could there be potential for friendshoring of American AI and data storage infrastructure to countries that are friendly and have cheaper energy, such as in Southeastern Europe or other developing areas, and particularly in Southern Europe or that sort of area? Could America offload some of the excess infrastructure to other countries as a development aid as well as a diplomatic tool?
Yes, I think that is a very important question because in the case of Latin America and Caribbean, our capacity is 500 gigawatt today. Our exercise say that by 2050, we need double of that. So we need 1,000 more gigawatts in electricity market I'm talking about. And so the effort is huge. The finance resources are huge as well. So in that regard, you need very good regulation and certainty for the regulation. And don't change the regulation every government, every political cycle. And in that regard, I think what is the main element when you see the disaster countries, is the country has applied state policy in the energy sector. And we really think that Latin America has opportunity to offer to the world this clean energy that we have is green, is competitive, is sure. And now we need to apply also a good regulation framework in order to give the signal that you need for the investment.
Thank you, Andres. I think that we reached our time. Let me thank you for very insightful, provocative remarks. I think that we covered a lot of ground throughout the discussion. We looked at security and policy shifts as drivers for market volatility. We talked about what is needed for more manufacturing and technological investments in North America, as well as the changes that need to happen to de-risk investments in global emerging economies that we foresee an increase in energy demand. The discussion has been quite interesting and rich. I would like to finish with a lightning round for you to talk about what could be the single most important either policy shift or technology innovation that can help us address these challenges. And just a very substantial and short answer, just a word.
I'd say policy changes to help unleash the production of critical minerals domestically.
Critical minerals.
I would say engagement to help finance and investors to strategically create ideas for investment that can move the needle on both energy and technology investments.
Maybe I repeat the last idea to have a state policy in the long term, because this is the only way to assure that you are going to have investment in a sector where you need 20, 25 or more years for each investment.
Okay.
If we're looking in the multilateral framework or globally, I think it has to be national security. It's the one area where we have commonality. If we're competing, we should have competition. But if that's the driver, we're going to compete against each other and potentially lose out vis-a-vis our adversaries like China. Obviously, climate drivers by itself hasn't been sufficient to make change. So I think we really have to hone in on national security.
Okay, security first. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.